All right, let's go ahead and begin. We will admit other people as they join us, but I want to welcome all of you to the League of Women Voters Seattle-King County session of Speak Up School. The Speak Up Schools are something that we began planning about a year ago, actually, preparing materials and curriculum that could be used across the state of Washington. And actually, we've even shared with Idaho, and they're hosting Speak Up Schools in their state as well. The prompt for it was redistricting. To prepare everyone for redistricting coming up this year. And I know that's why you were all invited to join us today. But the intention is to create materials that are reusable and lasting and can be used anytime someone needs to either refresh their understanding or learn to testify for the first time, whether that's before the state legislature or in a hearing, a public hearing, something like the Redistricting Commission will be holding. Again, my name is Cassa Hannon. I'm in the Renton-Newcastle area, a member of the League of Women Voters, Seattle-King County, and one of the volunteers on the Speak Up School planning team. It's my privilege to welcome you today, and I will be going over our first module, which will be an overview of how the day will go, an overview of redistricting to get us all on the same page in terms of our understanding of the redistricting process. And then we will turn it over to other modules today. So we will make sure you all understand what you can expect during our time together today and next Saturday. In addition to Allison Fair, who is our fabulous staff member, helping to make all of our arrangements and administer these sessions on behalf of the League, I have two other presenters today with us that you will be hearing from as presenters, Chelsea Jordan, as well as Lauren Pixley. And joining us, we will have two presenters who are going to present expert modules. Allison Caffrey, who is the League of Women Voters for the state of Washington, the redistricting chair, and David Wren from Dave's Redistricting app. So both of those presenters will also be part of our sessions today and next Saturday to give you an overview of some of the mapping tools that are both free and very approachable, fun to use to look at possible redistricting maps that you might be interested in if you want to explore the districts here in King County or throughout the state. So we'll be looking at that. Questions before we begin? Okay. We will be doing, breaking up the time into really 1 hour modules, more or less. You can understand that. And we'll take a break between each one of those. So you will have time to get up, move around, get some beverages, get some lunch, whatever you need to do. We'll make sure we have a break between each of the modules. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to share screen. And we will start the overview where you'll both get an understanding of what we'll be doing throughout the Speak Up School, as well as how we will spend our time together learning about redistricting. All right. Everyone can see my screen. Let me change my view. Awesome. So welcome again to Speak Up School. I want to give you an overview of the components that will make up our learning experience together. Today, the first one we'll start with is this welcome module, module 2, and that's where we're at right now. We're going to dive in with this. There are really 7 components to the overall Speak Up School curriculum. We will include 6 of them in our 2 days of Speak Up School. So this first one, module 2, is intended to give everyone an overview of the redistricting process and make sure we answer any questions that you need to know as you think about how you want to raise your voice and participate in the redistricting process. I know many of you have been through redistricting before. A lot of you probably chose to do this today because you've been involved and you know how important redistricting is and have already had the experience of testifying before the Redistricting Commission. Can I just have and see a show of hands? You can even just wave at the camera if you have previously testified before a Redistricting Commission. Thank you, Melissa. Others? Excellent. So we can see that we have a lot of experts amongst us. We also, I know, probably have people that are signed up because they want to learn about redistricting. You're also in exactly the right place for that. We're going to make sure that everyone has enough information to get started. And that's what we'll do the first thing out of the gate this morning. The next module we'll look at today will actually be module 4. Lauren Pixley will lead us through that. And that module is about how to write effective testimony. Whenever we're participating in a public hearing process, and certainly with this redistricting commission, we will want to be submitting written testimony in addition to any verbal testimony. Sometimes the written testimony may be the only thing that ends up being accepted because of time limits, things like that. So we want to be really good at written testimony, and we'll go over that together today. And then the third module we'll look at today is module 3, which is a mapping module. We heard from other people, there have already been 5 Speak Up schools held in other parts of the state. And the feedback from participants is that the mapping tools are the hook. That's what really gets the juices flowing and has people begin to understand why redistricting is important and how they what they might want to be sharing about before the Redistricting Commission. So we will do that with Allison McCaffrey this afternoon just before we close our session. So get excited for that. So those will be the 3 modules we'll do today: our overview, introduction, learning to write effective testimony, and then looking at mapping tools through data lenses. Okay, then next Saturday, we will start with module 5, which is testifying. That will be a chance to look at some effective ways to actually go through the motions of testifying. Then we will have another mapping tool with David Wren from Dave's Redistricting app. And again, this is another tool that's built for redistricting. It's used across the US, and it's a free tool. So David Wren will give us an overview of that, how to use it, and we will have a chance to get very familiar with some of these tools. And then our third hour next Saturday is open for practice and coaching. We can do some one-on-one coaching, have a chance to practice in a safe space with each other. And anybody who wants to and is ready to practice, that'll be our opportunity next Saturday. So that's how we will be using our time together. Questions or comments? Stop sharing for a moment. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. So redistricting, let's talk about what it is and why it's important. This is our intent today, is to make sure everybody has enough information to begin this learning process in a great way. So our goals for this session, we are going to explain the Washington State redistricting process. We'll help you understand how it works and what you can expect when you testify. We'll review the criteria required by the state of Washington's Constitution in drawing district maps. And we'll emphasize the importance of having people participate. Your voice matters. So let's do a quick poll. I want to get your input. How much do you already know about redistricting? I'm going to launch this poll and we'll ask you to respond right on your Zoom screen. It's all new to me. I know a little bit about redistricting. I've been researching and know a moderate amount, or I know a good deal about it. Excellent. More weighing in. Wonderful. All right, thank you for that. Let's look at our results together. Okay, so we've definitely got at least half the group saying, I know a little bit about it. Thank you for the people that are saying it's all new to me. That makes our time really meaningful together this morning. And then those of you who've been researching and know a moderate amount, great. We hope this helps solidify some of that and then gets you ready for the next step. After this year, we're all going to have some great expertise in the redistricting process. Thank you for participating in that. So redistricting and reapportionment. Redistricting is the process of drawing legislative and congressional districts so that each district has approximately equal numbers of people. That's the intention, is to make sure districts are approximately equal in the numbers of people. And we say both legislative and congressional. So when we're talking about the redistricting process for Speak Up School, we are talking about the districts that vote representatives for the Washington State Legislature and the districts that are voting for representatives in the US Congress. Okay. We believe districts should be drawn in a way that ensures people have a voice. And when districts are drawn in a fair way, democracy works. It matters. And I know that word fair is one of those words that everybody has a different, very personal definition for that. It's a word we'll be looking at more to figure out what do we mean when we say we want fair districts and a fair process. Let's look at the timeline. If you can see my cursor, this is where we are now in February through April of 2021. So what has already occurred as part of the redistricting process is that in 2020, we had the most recent census that happens every 10 years in the United States. That concluded, and that is a predecessor task to the redistricting process. So in January of this year, a redistricting commission was appointed. And that is also a parallel process to the public getting ready to participate in the redistricting process. We'll talk more about that. The League of Women Voters has been busy all of last year, again, getting ready to be preparing people to participate in the process. So we held train the trainer sessions to get people ready to host Speak Up schools like this one last December. And then again, 5 schools have already happened, with 2 more happening this weekend and next here and in Kitsap, as well as several activities associated with a national redistricting day of action, which is on April 29th. All of that is on our League of Women Voters Washington page. And then I'm anticipating there will be at least 4 more redistricting Speak Up schools because of the groups that have expressed interest in continuing to do that. So our goal and our intention was really to be ready, because it's expected that the Redistricting Commission will begin asking for public testimony in the May or June timeframe. And that period will go through September or October, if this year is similar to 2011. Now, again, we know we're in a pandemic, so most everything that's occurred so far has been through virtual gatherings, and the public meetings may all be virtual. Maybe not. We will have to see how that goes. We're preparing people no matter how they happen. We want you to be ready. The goal of the commission, so the commission has milestones they must meet. They need to have final maps submitted by November 15th. That is their goal, to be done by November 15th, to have their maps submitted. And then their maps are actually approved by the state legislature by February 6th is the latest date for that. The legislature has 30 days to amend the commission's map if they have a 2/3 vote in each chamber. But even if they amend the commission's recommended maps, they can only affect less than 2% of each district. Okay? And all of this is to ensure that in the elections in 2022, we're voting in the new districts. Questions or comments about this before we move on?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, yeah, I belong to a sorority and I'm really trying to get them trained up for this, but I'm connected to a part of them being in California. So when you say this, is this just for King County or Washington State, or is this like overall US?
Is great. So a lot of the material, like the detailed timeline I just showed you, our commission was appointed here. And as we talk about the makeup of the commission, et cetera, that is driven by processes at each state. So it may be that, again, you can still use our materials and say, I need to replace that with how this works in California. Or
Okay.
maybe doing a joint session that says, here's California's process, here's Washington's process, which could be very interesting. I think
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And I hope you do that. And if you want support, definitely reach out.
Yeah, I've already presented it to them. I'm just trying to I just sent you an email asking for your personal contact.
Okay.
So I'm trying to tie it together because my sorority, we get points for things that we do.
This would be fantastic. And again, the information has been really well received. So the more we can broaden the use and the reuse of it, the better.
Thank you.
So what other questions do we have? Okay, so that's the timeline. Let's now talk about the commission because that's also quite interesting. And at this point, we know who the commissioners are. So as I mentioned, the commissioners were appointed in January of this year. And this is essentially our redistricting commission for 2021 for the state of Washington. The way that these people are selected is it's a 5-member independent commission. In order to submit their final maps in November, they have to have 3 of the 4 voting members have to be in agreement. So there is a little bit of a process for them to move forward, even if they are not completely unanimous. This process for how we would do redistricting in the state of Washington was established by a constitutional amendment in 1983. The way these people are selected, the majority and minority leaders of the Washington State Senate and Washington State House of Representatives each appoint 1 commissioner. So again, the Senate is the majority leader is appointing a commissioner and the minority leader appointing a commissioner. And for the House, the majority leader is appointing a commissioner and the minority leader is appointing a commissioner. And that's why you can see here we have essentially 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on this 4-member voting commission. And then the chair is a non-voting member. Sarah Augustine is our chair, and she was actually selected by the commissioners, appointed by the 4 other commissioners. And again, her role is really to facilitate the commission, the meetings of the commission and public input and all of that. The requirements to be a commissioner, or in order to be eligible to be a commissioner, you cannot have been an elected official or a party officer in the 2 years prior to being appointed. So of these 4 people, you would know that none of them in 2018 or 2019 held an elected official position or a party officer role. And they cannot be a registered lobbyist within the 12 months preceding being nominated for the commission. Okay. The redistricting rules. So what is it we're really trying to do? Again, the main idea is to have the districts distributed with relatively equal population in each district. But there are very specific rules defined by the Washington State Constitution. The state constitution requires that congressional and state legislative districts should be contiguous, compact, and convenient, following natural, geographic, artificial, or political subdivision boundaries. So that's already kind of a fun statement to unpack, because it says they should follow natural and artificial. Both of those adjectives are in that same sentence. But in general, this is meant to be guidance. Contiguous, compact, and convenient, following natural, geographic, artificial, or political subdivision boundaries. The Constitution states that the Redistricting Commission must not purposely draw plans to favor or discriminate against any political party or group. State statutes require that congressional and state legislative districts preserve areas recognized as communities of interest. And state statutes also require the commission to draw districts that provide fair and effective representation and encourage electoral competition. So a couple of other things to point out here. Communities of interest is a term often used in redistricting discussions, and actually 24 states have a reference to preserving communities of interest in their redistricting guidelines. Washington State does not have a legal definition of that. But if we start to think about what could be considered a community of interest, go ahead and add to chat. What do you think might be good examples of communities of interest if you start to think about it? Communities of interest. Tribal nations, yes. People of color, cities. Tribal lands is a great one. Traditionally Black communities. Jurisdictions like cities, yes. Other kinds of things like groups that work together, that's great. Population saturation, that is one of the things that gets very interesting as we look at what changed from 10 years ago. Economic areas like timber, underserved communities, these are really great ideas. All of you are following this. Exactly, and I'm so excited for you to see the data lenses presentation as our last session today, rural or urban, because when we talk about data lenses and how might we view possible districts, these are some of the lenses that you'll get to see shown. Like, what if we just consider environmental issues and create districts around that? What would that look like? And you'll see how easy it is to actually look at it that way, because the data is already there. All right, great. Thank you very much for that participation in chat. So those are the rules that the commission is expected to follow. Let's keep going a little bit. And back to why should we care about redistricting? And just this idea of what does that mean, that the process should be fair and the district should be fair. Well, it really is about your voting power. And when we talk about that, it is about maximizing everybody's voting power. Voting power depends on having fair maps, where the voter has a good shot at electing someone who will advocate for the issues that they care about. You should care about how the congressional and legislative maps are drawn so that they are fair to you. And in the state of Washington, one of the reasons this current process was adopted in 1983 is to prevent the idea of one political party dominating the process. So as you can see, the fact that there are 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats does help to minimize political parties preserving their power so that they have a way to always elect the same people into office. That's the intention of that. Let's look a little bit of the effects of redistricting. And one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we are involved and actively participating in this process. Crystal Fincher, we like this quote from her. Really, the suggestion is that districts can be drawn in ways that either enhance the voice of communities or dilute their influence, power, and ability to be really represented. And we want to be enhancing the ability to influence the process. Redistricting can be done in ways that protect incumbents, determine which political party controls the government, or allow competition in a district. When there is competition in an election, officials recognize that they need to listen to their constituents in order to be reelected, and they will work hard to represent their constituents. Having districts that promote competitive races in elections really is an avenue toward holding our elected officials accountable. When we have fair redistricting, voters pick officials rather than officials picking their voters. Officials listen to their constituents since their constituents can vote them out of office. The concerns of the voters are followed up on by officials. It really is that idea of public service, that they are working to serve us. Communities of interest have officials that will care about them. Officials are accountable, and incumbents don't have that unfair advantage at the polls. The voices of diverse individuals can bring about change. That's what we're really hoping for. Let's look at our current districts. So when we talk about congressional districts in the state of Washington, again, there are 10 districts. These lines are drawn such that the voters in these districts are electing their representatives in Congress. So they're electing people for the US House of Representatives and the US Senate. And there are 10 congressional districts in the state of Washington. We do not anticipate gaining any seats in Congress through this current redistricting process. The 2020 census indicates that Washington is not going to gain representation in US Congress. Other states will. Some pretty dramatic changes. We're going to see the state of Texas gain seats, several other places where they will actually gain one or more seats in Congress as a result of shifting population around the US and the most recent census. So these are the current 10 districts. If we look at the legislative districts, now there are 49 of these, and in each of these 49 districts, these voters are choosing their representatives for the state legislature. So they are choosing people to represent them in the Washington State House of Representatives and the Washington State Senate. And there are 49 districts. So some interesting things here. Again, a lot of opportunities to look at ways of how we might do this differently now that we have a chance. And you'll see great ideas this afternoon when we have Allison McCaffrey present to us the data lenses module. But some of the things that we already know in many cases, like with Yakima Nation and the Colville Nation, the tribal lands are split into 2 districts or more than 1 district. And in that case, it really has the effect of diluting voting power. Makes it challenging for them to have somebody from the tribal nation elected to represent them in the state legislature. So those are some of the opportunities that we might want to look at. Some other things here in the 15th district, which is this eastern part of Yakima, there is a majority Latino population now, currently in the current districts, but they don't yet have a majority Latino voters because the count includes people under 18, undocumented immigrants, and permanent residents. So in 2011, when the districts were drawn, definitely a majority Latino population, but not yet majority Latino voters. So those are the kinds of issues that can be really interesting and helpful to look at, especially when you look at how have those demographics changed in 10 years from one census to the next. In our area, I know the 9th district is one where there is actually a group that's looking at preserving the 9th district, and you can check that out. They have a site called preserveour9th.org, where they are saying, you know, right now we have a majority of people of color, and it's giving us some voting power that we really want to have a way to preserve. So if you're interested in that one, a lot of initiatives underway such as that, where every time you make a change, you might be enhancing one group's, but you don't want to be diluting another group if that's something that's working well. Questions or comments about the current districts? Thank you. I'm seeing your question, Anne. The distribution of state and federal funds is also important, isn't it? Yes. That may or may not be done by district, but yes, a lot of things. The reason that it affects is because a district chooses a representative, and then a representative is voting on funds and budget distribution, et cetera, at both the state and the federal level. So yes, in terms of getting government resources, the district lines make a big difference in how those decisions are made. That's a great question. Is the chair of the commission a member of one or the other political parties? No, that it's a nonpartisan chair. Great question. So Sarah Augustine, who is our current chair of the Redistricting Commission, is not a member of one or the other political party. That's a nonpartisan role. Can the census results change redistricting? So that's a good general question, Joe. Thank you for that. That's exactly what we're doing. So one of the other things, remember, let's go back. I don't know, we need to go back and look at the timeline, but as we said, we've been doing a lot of things to get ready for this process because we wanted people ready to participate. But the other thing that is happening that feeds this process is that 2020 census. And completing the 2020 census was challenging this past year because of the pandemic. Often there's a lot of on foot knocking on doors and really checking to see where people are and asking people to complete the census and really checking person to person checking of where people are and what's happening. So that was a bit hampered this last year. I know they did allow more time a couple of times, but the data is going to be available in enough time. And that's why we do redistricting every 10 years, because at the federal level, it's a mandate that we have a census, that we recount everybody in the United States every 10 years, and that feeds the redistricting process. And if you think about how our population shifts across a 10-year period in this country, some places experience incredible growth. Other places may experience actually people leaving that area and moving somewhere else. You experience a population maybe aging, whether that's younger people actually becoming voters or older people moving out of the workforce, and how that affects an area. So that's why it makes sense to do this every 10 years, even though it's a very involved process.
Oh.
And that's also why we expect that you need to anticipate that there really is a need to change the districts. So it's not likely that you get to a point where you say, you know, we like the districts the way we are, we should keep them. Because the first thing you'll see is that they're no longer relatively equal district to district in terms of the goal of equal numbers of people in each district. Sarah Augustine's background is pretty cool, so I do invite you to. Thank you, Melissa, for adding that link. I've been to a couple of their meetings so far, and she's pretty fabulous in a leadership role also. And I'm very concerned about the suppression that may have happened because of the debate about non-citizen questions proposed for the census. How is this likely an issue to taken up by the commission? So great question. So it is true, there really was a concern that we would have suppressed participation in the census, that we may have people that were not counted just because of the debate of putting a citizenship question on the census, which they did not end up doing. But there was a concern that people would be afraid to participate in the census, meaning that we would have a lot of people that were uncounted. At this point, I know that's why they've spent more time validating census results. And they have ways to compare against other data to say, you know, it feels like we've counted everyone, or it feels like we have a significant gap. And there is a requirement to use the census data, but there's also other data available that is a great validity check. So when you see that, when you look at the mapping tools, we have mapping tools already because they've been using 2018 data. They've been using other data sources to begin to anticipate what 2020 is going to look like. So there are already other data sources feeding into those even before census data from 2020 is available. So it's a great question. The census was also delayed due to underfunding and almost a 2-year lack of a Census Bureau director. Yes, it's been a challenging time. Thank you. I love it. You all have so much information. Thank you very much for contributing these thoughts and ideas. That is incredibly helpful. All right, let's go back to looking at our districts. So at this point, I want to share a video with you to begin to understand what to expect in the testifying process. And one of the things that we thought would be interesting, again, we started this training before developing or thinking about training and preparing people to testify with the idea that it would be similar to 2011. In 2011, the commission held about 10 public hearings around the state of Washington in different locations, and people came and testified in person. That's kind of what we anticipated might happen this time. And then of course, everything has been shut down and virtual. Maybe that's going to be a benefit, because I think that certainly has a way of making this potentially accessible for people, because they don't have to be in a certain location or travel to a certain location to testify. Obviously, there are still other barriers with people participating in a session like this one, but it may be that actually opens it up. So that could be interesting. But what we've done is I'm going to share a short video clip with you, and we will see some of a description from the last time 2011's Redistricting Commission, the executive director, Bonnie Bunning, explaining the process to people at that time.
I want to let you know that any comments here that you give, any of the comments that come in on the webcast, letters, plans, etc., they're all being provided to the commissioners for their consideration. Our ground rules tonight are let you know that the commissioners are here in a listening mode. They may follow up with questions, but they're basically here to listen to you. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity who wants to speak. So if you haven't signed up, we'd appreciate if you would sign up and check the I want to say something box. If you prefer to give your comment in writing, there are comment forms back there, or again, letters or emails are fine. When you speak into the microphone, make sure you're close enough so that people in the back of the room, as well as the commission, can hear you. That's not very far, as you can see. State your name and affiliation at the beginning, and please try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes so that everybody has an opportunity. And then we ask that you respect each other's points of view. Thanks again for being here, and welcome to the forum.
Okay, that was the way that they introduced the opportunity to testify during one of the public hearings in 2011. Some of the things you'll notice that she mentioned, the commissioners are here in a listening mode. So when they are inviting public input, we really want to remember that they are truly trying to get as many perspectives and as much information as they can get. So as you think about participating in the process, understand that's what you're wanting to do. You're wanting to share a perspective, provide information, and give input. It's not that you need to anticipate there will be a debate and I need to defend what I'm saying. That's not the way you should anticipate it. Think about it as I'm sharing my perspective, my input is important, and I have information that I can contribute to back up what I'm saying. That's the best way to think about how you will participate in this process. Okay, all right. Why should I testify? So other reasons why you might end up wanting to testify. Again, we hope you agree that your testimony is important, but some of the other reasons, you and or an organization that you belong to, you hold a unique perspective. You want to better inform policymakers and your community about who you are, who your organization is, and what your perspective is. Maybe you want to attract attention to an issue or your position on an issue. Maybe that's something that hasn't been heard or hasn't been heard enough. You want to gain media coverage on an issue, or you want to position yourself or your organization as advocates for an issue. When you're seen as an advocate for an issue, you or your organization, then you're often asked for advice on that issue or invited to participate in processes where that issue is being discussed. Our goal is to help you create the best possible testimony for whatever reason it is that you want to testify. People who testify can make a big difference. Maybe not at each hearing as one individual, but when you and you and you and me, when we're all participating, it has an impact. People who testify also let others know that you're an advocate on an issue. You help form coalitions, and you can let the media know about the issues that you care about. One of the things that often is said is this phrase, people don't care about redistricting. Politicians may truly believe this, that people are unaware of it and they don't care about it. So we can do whatever we want because people don't care about redistricting. That's really the main bias we're wanting to turn around. We want to make it very evident that people do understand redistricting and care very much about it. Then they know people are paying attention and this does have to be done right. So back to the chat. What's one word? What one word do you hear? Or I'm sorry, let's start. What one word do you think of when you hear the term redistricting? What one word do you think of? Type it into chat. Gerrymandering. What else? Census, yes. Redistricting, what jumps into your mind? Controversy. Voter suppression. Fairness, all right, thank you for optimism. Power, money and power. Evolution of political and voter groups, yes. Will my legislative district still be the same? Unlikely. Yeah, but that's what we're thinking, right? Unfair. So immediately we think this is we hear the word redistricting and we think something unfair is about to happen to us. Better resources. That's great. Another optimistic view, Crystal. Thank you. So all of these are valid. Yes, Duffy, that's right. We think some higher power, some power on high that we're distant from does this, and it's happening to us. That is such a valuable perspective, because I do think that's what most people think if they think about it at all. They're assuming there isn't much we can do about it. So thank you again. You're here because you're actually believing I can participate, I can be part of this process, and there's a lot we can do about it. It's a process that supports Mark Twain's view of statistics. Thank you, Catherine. Do you want to share that for others? Lies, damn lies, and statistics, according to Mark Twain. That's right. And a lot of people will think that. That's why it'll be fun for all of you to see how you can get your hands on some of this data today and make that readily accessible to you, so you can feel a little closer to understanding what everybody's working with. One of the other things that I know you'll hear from Allison McCaffrey today, but I want to emphasize a lot, is that the League of Women Voters will be proposing a set of maps to the commission. So not just weighing in, not just facilitating testimony, actually saying, we've done some map work and we think these maps would work well. And the way those are being derived is through a series of listening sessions that are held for any group that wants to host one. And for a listening session, Allison will come with, here's several possible maps. Tell me what the issues are in this region, right here in this little community. Tell me what it is that we want to optimize for or maximize, and work maps right in that session. So that when the League of Women Voters proposes a set of maps, it will be based on having done several of these listening sessions around the state. If you're interested in those, you're going to get all of that information just as a result of demonstrating your interest here today. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you, Duffy. Okay, questions, comments. I want to show you where we are, but what other questions? If this is intended to be an overview of redistricting, to give you enough information to now start to learn, what questions have I not answered for you that you still have? And then let me ask my experts, those of you who have participated before, what have we not yet said about the redistricting process that you think it's important to know? And in this case, if you'd like to unmute and actually speak, please do. Are there comments that you would add about redistricting that we have not yet said?
Well, this is Joe. Go ahead, Catherine, because she had her hand up. Go ahead, Catherine.
Sorry, I'm not sure what our protocol is. We were talking in the chat quite a bit about the census, and I believe I remember that when the census provides correctives and proxies to improve the data, that those choices are published somewhere by the Census Bureau. So for example, if you are worried about the issue of citizenship having affected the census outcome, you should be able to look up what the Census Bureau did to adjust data for Washington State or California, wherever you are, and then you will be in a position to make a coherent argument as to whether or not the Census Bureau did a good job about that. I don't remember where that data is, and I don't remember how, math geeky it is, but I think it is required that that data be public.
I am sure you're right about that. And I just received, again, I'm on several lists now. I just received some invitations to sessions where the people from the Census Bureau are starting to present data. So there is an obligation to make sure, first of all, you're absolutely right, Catherine, it's all public. And then secondly, that there is an opportunity to engage in those discussions and to question those people. So I love that. Thank you. Census Bureau website is extensive, but they do have everything posted there. So I think that's great. If this is also a good question, probably for David Rinn next Saturday, because he's going to be close to that data for Dave's redistricting app. Thank you. Let's go to, it was Joe, and then Melissa and Brian also have their hands up. Joe, did you still have a comment?
I have a sort of a question because there was two different things. Like when someone said they testified earlier this year, I'm kind of curious as what they testified about if they want to share. And then the other thing is that I thought I understood from what you were saying that this redistricting only happens like every 10 years. And so that's why you guys are like really trying to help us understand it. So like, I always have a question or a comment, and then it all ends up being confusing because of the way I kind of communicate sometimes. But the thing is that for someone who did it earlier this year, then did that mean that they knew about this last year? That's why they were able to do it this year?
Okay, so that may be, I'll invite that person to comment, but the Redistricting Commission has already started holding meetings, and the public is invited to those meetings. And in their meetings so far, they've been allowing 15 minutes for public comment. And as they've been inviting that, people have been getting 1 or 2 minute speak as fast as you can kind of moments. That comment is intended to be about their process, not necessarily about the districts, but that public comment has been a lot of people saying, we hope that you will have public hearings. We hope that you will make them accessible. We hope that you will find ways to hear from these people. Something like that, where right now, so far, the commission has been asking for input about how they will run their process. Once they get going in the May-June timeframe, that's when they'll be asking for input about where the district lines should be drawn. Does that help, Joe?
It helps, but the thing is, how do you even find that out? Like what you're saying, you said they're telling people about it. So what, you just look on the internet? I mean, how do you even find out that? You go to their site?
The commission's meetings are public, and they actually have been giving not a ton of advance notice that they're holding meetings. So you maybe 4 or 5 days in advance, you find out when their next meeting is, but we can get you all on in the loop on that information too. Let's go to Brian and then Melissa. Brian, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I wanted to have a comment, and also I also had just recently testified before the last meeting, which was on Monday. What I talked about when I testified was, one, I'm happy to see how Washington is nonpartisan/bipartisan. It's not the legislature, it is a separate commission. I also wanted to remind them, don't just look at population, but here's something that I want to pass on to everybody when you're looking at the map. Look geographically. What is a resource that, if split between 2 legislatures or more, will cause that particular resource to now become not as important during discussion? And the other thing is, I also talked about, let's make sure that we also, as brought up earlier, we do not weaken the vote of an organization, such as you pointed out, the Latino vote, the Black vote, various votes like that. We need to make sure that they actually still have power in their vote. But make sure that, at least for in your area, take a look at your districts the way they are currently drawn, congressional and legislative, and then look at the resources and look at what has changed within the past 10 years. Because those are the things that we really want to talk about. Yes, population is important, but there's the resources. Do you want to have a lake all of a sudden put into 4 separate districts, and that lake is no longer important to anybody?
Yes.
So that's what I wanted to point out and discuss that importance of that. And again, thank you very much for holding this session.
That's great, Brian. Thank you for, that was exactly the example that Joe was asking about. And thanks for already being in front of the commission and giving your input. Melissa.
Hey, so I also have been testifying, and it's been one last cycle that they did this. Not a single set of legislators was districted into the same districts. So they overused the location of where people lived, and you can see some funny pokey bits is what I call them, that sometimes were around protecting incumbents from having to run against each other. Then I also talked about the need to do formal consultation with tribal nations. They are not just another constituency group. And then the piece that got reported on in the news is that one of the commissioners has an outstanding rape allegation against him. And so that is of deep concern to me and other survivors of sexual assault. So that's the piece that got covered in the news. In terms of how to know about it, I just posted in the chat that you can subscribe for emails, and so it'll email you. It's generally Monday evenings. The commissioners agreed to block out Monday evening on their calendars in case there was a need for a meeting. And then the meeting, Sarah Augustine and now the new executive director determine when they need the commissioners available for votes. So that's sort of what, that's why it's a little bit, I guess, not predictable, because the commissioners don't want to meet every week, which is what they were doing originally, but the executive director and the non-voting chair requested that they be available as needed.
Melissa, so helpful. Thank you. And thank you for adding that in the chat. Duffy, you still had a question or comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Am I under the impression that when the public comment period starts, that perhaps the League of Women Voters of the state of Washington will have, as a body, a map suggestion to the commission? So if that would be the case, then if we as individuals would be testifying, we would be identifying ourselves as members, but would we then be testifying in support of what the state league is doing? Am I getting the drift correctly?
That's a good question, Duffy. So it is not my intention to say, I have you all here so that you will advocate for what I want you to advocate for. That's not what we're doing. We have you all here so that you can have the information you need and the know-how to advocate for whatever you find important. And that may be that you introduce yourself as a member of some other organization, especially if it's another organization that you don't think is going to have been already represented in the process. That may be how you choose to represent yourself, right? So if you are at a point where you also want to support what's being proposed by the league, that's great. But you may have an issue on a very tiny, very local, personal aspect of this that affects a line that is really important for them to hear. So this is not about saying, let's all get lined up to say the same thing to the commission. Absolutely not. I just wanted you to also know the other things that the league was doing so that you're aware of that.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you for that great question. All right, everyone, I want to make sure that we have time for a quick break before the next module. So what we're going to do, first of all, thank you for your high level of engagement so far. We are going to break until 12:15. You can stay on the Zoom link if you want to, just mute and turn your video off and rejoin us at 12:15. Get up, move around, get a beverage, get some lunch, whatever you need to do. And then we will join Lauren Pixley to learn about writing effective testimony at 12:15. Thank you.